So, today I'm going to share with you 8 tips for getting better sleep. And I'm very happy to be sharing about this because I love sleep and dreams and learning about them and sharing about them. And of course, because sleep is so important for our health and how we feel. And it is a big challenge area for a number of people. So, if you are one of those people, I hope that this information will give you some help, some new ideas of things that might give you better sleep. And even if you don't have challenges with sleep, I hope that this will help you look at your bedtime and sleep time in a little different way and maybe give you ways to make it even more enjoyable or even better quality. And I am going to have this is part 1 of 2 episodes on sleep tips. Today, I'm going to share 8 tips with you, and then I have 12 more for the part 2. I am decided to break this into 2 because I love to be thorough and go deep with information and content, but I also want you guys to be able to maybe listen to an episode on a commute or while you're doing a household task like the dishes or folding laundry. So I thought I'd just go ahead and break it into 2 when I can. So, welcome back to the show for all of us, which is a show about helping you take really good care of yourself. I'm Sarah Moran, and my background is in writing and educating people about self care and resilience, personal growth, and making lifestyle choices for their health and well being. And we're going to start with just a very short bit about why sleep is important. I might do an episode about that in the future because I think that the more we understand things, the more we're motivated to make healthy changes in our habits and in our patterns. But for now, I'm going to keep it really quick and just summarize that sleep is critical for really every function that we have. And it plays a huge role in mood, affecting anxiety, depression. It affects the hormonal system, metabolism, weight, cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, inflammation, immune function, and stress response, really pretty much everything. And we'll just take one of those issues, which is mood. We live in a culture and a time when the rates of anxiety and depression are continuing to rise at alarming rates and for people of all ages. So, sleep's a really important thing to be talking about now because the research shows that it has a major influence on mood, on attitude, outlook, emotional reactions, impulse control for people of all ages. And I wrote this book called Take Care, the Sleep Guide a while ago, and one of the people who I interviewed in here is psychiatrist Henry Emmons out of the Minneapolis area. Dr. Emmons said, for people who are vulnerable to mental health issues, sleep is the linchpin of protection. So I also want to mention, as long as I'm mentioning Dr. Emmons, that I highly recommend him and his work. He gives such a lovely, holistic, and more just fully dimensional view about emotional health, mental health, and his books, The Chemistry of Calm, looks at ways to address anxiety, and then The Chemistry of Joy looks at ways to address depression. And I also recently saw that he has a podcast called Joy Lab. So I'm going to link to Dr. Emmons' work as well in the notes, just because he's amazing and his work is amazing, and I highly, highly recommend it. But let's get right into the sleep tips. I just wanted to highlight a little bit about mood first. And these tips, by the way, these 8 tips are not in any particular order, so just kind of going with it. Number 1 is to try a grounding practice before bed. And grounding practices are something that are immensely helpful for a number of things. I do hope to do another episode or plan to, or perhaps some online classes with more expanded ideas and information about grounding. But for now, I'm just going to give you a few simple things that you could do. One is a little foot massage before bed. You can keep a nice jar of oil next to, on your nightstand or whatever, and just give yourself even a 2-minute massage on your feet before you go to bed. That can feel really, really nice. Or you can go step outside for a few minutes if your climate and the time of year allows it. Just standing barefoot on the grass or the soil is a really lovely practice too, that's grounding. And if that's not going to work with where you're at, just stepping even outside for a few minutes, looking at the stars or listening to the breeze of the trees where you're at and just being outside for a few minutes before bed is another way that you can kind of ground yourself in. Number two is to try some teas and supplements that can help with relaxation and sleep. The teas I would recommend, starting with, you can look at chamomile tea and lemon balm tea. And these are also teas that you can give kids. And one note here, I think it's really nice to start with tea as a goal when you're looking at supplements, at least with kids, because of the fact that, for a few reasons. One is because we live in a culture where the default is if we have a problem, we take a pill. And we don't necessarily want to emphasize that as the way that we address things. That sometimes is the way that we need to address something. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that if there's a need to take a medication, but to help instill that there are other ways to address things too. And with tea, what we're doing also is teaching the power of plants, and there's so much that we could talk about with that alone. But I think it's really nice for kids to learn that, nature provides for us as well. So something like chamomile tea or lemon balm tea can just be a nice, cozy, comforting, relaxing routine and time for connection for kids. And of course, for anybody. With adults as well, you can look for teas with valerian root. You can look for teas with catnip leaf or sage. All of these things can help. And there are some blends, some herbal tea blends that mix a lot of these different plants together for just a really nice, soothing, calming tea that you could do before bed. And if I know the tea idea sometimes is just not realistic for people, and that's fine. There are tinctures for, kids especially. You can look for a lemon balm tincture or some chamomile, and then just going to a pill form is another option as well. So if it just needs to be quick and easy, nothing wrong with that either. So you can look at those options for yourself. And of course, as with anything, when you're adding in an herbal supplement, you want to discuss with a healthcare provider, especially if you're taking other medications, to make sure that there's not any interactions and that that's something safe. With valerian root in particular, it can be pretty potent. And so that's something that's nice to look at and make sure it's a good choice for you. Number three is that idea of cutting screen time before bed. So, giving yourself an electronics curfew. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is simply the light. The blue light can kind of cause your melatonin levels to drop, and that's going to make it harder for you to fall asleep. And then second is that the content can really get your mind going, whether that content is the news or it's social media or it's even a call with somebody like a friend. If it's personal or something in your community or global events, whatever the case may be, it still can kind of get your mind going, and it might get your adrenaline going if it's something that makes you feel upset or angry or nervous. And now basically you are introducing ideas or content or information that your mind has to process, or it's another set of emotions that you're processing through. And so if you can give yourself a nice cushion, at least an hour, maybe more is even ideal before bed, where you're just not consuming anything on a screen. And number four is similar along those lines, which is about keeping emotional conversations for earlier in the day. So if you have things that you need to make a decision on or process through, save those for a different time when you can. I know that's not always realistic, but just be aware that the closer and closer you get to bedtime, if you're talking about a topic that could be, something that gets you really thinking through or in any way emotional, it's just maybe not the best time, because we can also be more emotional the closer it gets to nighttime. And that's why I think mid morning, as a side note, is sort of your sweet spot if you're needing to have a conversation where you're making a decision about something or really need to process through something, and you don't want big emotions to be interfering with that process. Number five is to try tapping or EFT. And I would highly recommend you check out my episode 5, which is called A Favorite Tool for Stress, because tapping is a favorite tool for stress of mine. It is so easy to use, it's very empowering, it's very well researched, and people of all ages can do it. The research shows that it does help with sleep quality and it improves insomnia. And on a related note, it's also helpful for anxiety, depression, general stress, and PTSD, which of course are all things that can interfere with sleep. So I'd really recommend that you look into that and check out that episode, which has some links to some of my favorite resources on it, where you can even find some audios and videos that will guide you through tapping for sleep specifically. And what you can do with that, I mean, you can spend 5 minutes before bed and benefit from that. So I need a little sip of water here. Okay, so number 6 is to make sure that you rule out any disordered sleep issues, any sleep disorders. Things like sleep apnea, for example, can often be overlooked if you don't fit the profile of the stereotype, especially for women. This is the case in a lot of diagnostic processes, unfortunately. In the past, a lot of times research was based on looking at males and some more obvious signs and symptoms for a number of things. And in women, these signs and symptoms and experiences can appear differently and often be more subtle. And so they just don't get caught as often. And that's just something to look into. There are home tests for sleep apnea. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole big thing where you have to go somewhere and sleep overnight and get hooked up into multiple sorts of electrodes. And so I would just encourage people to look at some of those signs and symptoms and see if you are a person who struggles with sleep, if that could be something you're experiencing. And number 7 is one of my favorite teachers is Prune Harris. She is an energy expert and has amazing, amazing work. And she has a course called the Sleep Solution course on her website. I will link to that as well. It's a 90-minute course, and you just buy it, and then you have access to the recording always. And I can't say enough good things about Prune. She, like I said, she's an energy expert, and she's essentially using acupressure points and different ways of working with your subtle energy on your own to encourage good sleep. And so that's something that I would really recommend would be a worthwhile investment. Any of her classes, any of her work, but that sleep solution course, like I said, I'll link to that as well. Or you can just search up her name, Prune Harris, and sleep course, and you'll probably come up to that. Number 8 is to develop a routine that you look forward to. Sleeping can be a vulnerable time for a lot of people. It can bring up a lot of fears for a number of reasons. And if you're somebody who's had challenges with sleep, then it can be a time that, you really start to have negative correlations with. And so, one way to sort of flip that is to see what you can do to make it a time of your day that you can look forward to. One of the sleep and dream experts I've worked with before and interviewed before is Rubin Naiman. And I love this quote from him one time when I was interviewing him for that book. He said, "You should go down like the sun. You should go down like the sun." In other words, peacefully and gradually. You want to kind of give yourself some time and space for a bedtime routine that you really enjoy. And I think a lot of times people have routines for their babies and for their kids, but at some point, having a lovely little routine gets lost. And let's try and bring that back for ourselves and bring back that time and that space. You can think about what is something that would make bedtime an appealing time for you, because that's going to be different for all of us. But things like journaling, the tapping that I mentioned earlier, meditating, prayer, gratitude practices, some self massage or foot soak, bringing in some relaxing essential oils, some peaceful music, doing some light reading, especially if you have a great book you're looking forward to and you know you're going to spend a little time doing that before bed. Finding comfortable clothes, maybe, pajamas that you really like, and starting to turn down the lights before bed. These are all ways that you can just sort of set the tone for your sleep and make it a time that feels peaceful for you that you can look forward to. So, I hope that gives you some ideas to try. And if you have any friends or people who might benefit from more ideas about sleep, I hope that you'll share this with them and also join me next time for part 2, where I will have 12 more tips for you. And I also hope that you'll subscribe and follow the show. It is free on YouTube and also Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I hope to get going on Substack as well and maybe Instagram. So I'll let you know when I kind of get those things up and running. But thanks again for taking the time and for joining me. I really appreciate you being here, and you take care. Bye bye.